While thinking of this matter, he fancied that he heard a faint sound in the direction of the table. What kind of sound he could hardly have explained. He did not turn his head. Why should he, in the darkness? But he listened. Why should he not? And listening, he grew giddy and grasped the arms of the chair for support. There was a strange ringing in his ears. His head seemed bursting. His chest was oppressed by the constriction of his clothing. He wondered why it was so, and whether there were symptoms of fear. Then, with a long and strong expiration, his chest appeared to collapse, and with the great grasp with which he refueled his exhausted lungs, the vertigo left him, and he knew so intently, had he listened, that he had held his breath almost to suffocation. The revelation was vexatious. He arose, pushed away the chair with his foot, and strode to the center of the room. But one does not strike far in darkness, he began to grope, and finding the wall, followed it to an angle, turned, following it past the two windows, and there in another corner, came into violent contact with the reading stand, overturning it. It made a clatter that startled him. He was annoyed. How the devil could I have forgotten where it was, he muttered, and groped his way along the third wall to the fireplace. I must put things to right, he said, feeling the floor for a decanter. Having recovered that, he lighted it and instantly turned his eyes to the table, where naturally nothing undergone any change. The reading stand lay unobserved upon the floor. He had forgotten to put it to rights. He looked all about the room, dispersing the deeper shadows by movement of the candles in his hands, and crossing over to the door, tested it by turning and pulling the knob with all his strength. It did not yield, and this seemed to afford him a certain satisfaction. Indeed, he secured it more firmly by a bolt which he had not before observed. Returning to his chair, he looked at his watch. It was 9:30. With a start of surprise, he held the watch at his ear. It had not stopped. The candle was now visibly shorter. He again extinguished it, placing it on the door at his side as before. Mr. Jarrett was not at his ease. He was distinctively dissatisfied with his surroundings, and with himself for being so. What have I to fear, he thought. This is ridiculous and disgraceful. I will not be so great a fool. But courage does not come of saying, I will be courageous, nor of recognizing its appropriateness to the occasion. The more Jarrett condemned himself, the more reason he gave himself for condemnation. The greater the number of variations which he played upon the simple theme of the harmlessness of the dead, the more insupportable grew the discord of his emotions. What? He cried aloud in the anguish of his spirits. What? Shall I, who have not the shade of superstition in my nature, I, who have no belief in immortality, I, who knew, and never more clearly than now, that the afterlife is the dream of desire, shall I lose at once my bed, my honor, and my self-respect? Perhaps my reason, perhaps certain savage ancestors dwelling in caves and burrows conceived the monstrous notion that the dead walk by night, that, distinctly, unmistakably, Mr. Jarrett heard behind him a soft sound of footfalls, deliberate, regular, successfully nearer. Just before daybreak the next morning, Dr. Halverson and his young friend Harper were driving slowly through the streets of North Beach in the doctor's coupe. Have you still the confidence of youth in the courage or stolidity of your friend? Said the elder man. Do you believe that I have lost this wager? I know you have, replied the other, with enfeebling emphasis. Well, upon my soul, I hope so. It was spoken earnestly, almost solemnly. There was a silence for a few moments. Harper, the doctor resumed, looking very serious in the shifting half-lights that entered the carriage as they passed the street lamps. I don't feel altogether comfortable about this business. If your friend had not irritated me by the contemptuous nature in which he had treated my doubt of his endurance, a purely physical quality, and by the cool imbecility of his suggestion that the corpse be that of a physician, I should not have gone on with it. If anything should happen, we are ruined, and as I fear, we deserve to be. What can happen? Even if the matter should be taken a serious turn, of which I am not at all afraid, Manchester has only to resurrect himself and explain matters. With a genuine subject from the dissecting room, or one of your late patients, it might be different. Dr. Manchester then had been as good as his promise. He was the corpse. Dr. Halverson was silent for a long time. As the carriage, at a snail pace, crept along the same street he had travelled 2 or 3 times already, presently he spoke. Well, let us hope that Mancher, if he had to rise from the dead, has been discreet about it. A mistake in that might make matters worse instead of better. Yes, said Harper. Jared will kill him. But, Doctor, looking at his watch as the carriage passed a gas lamp, it is nearly 4 o'clock at last. A moment later, the two had quitted the vehicle and were walking briskly towards the long unoccupied house belonging to the doctor, in which they had immured Mr. Jared in accordance with the terms of the Mad Wager. As they neared it, they met a man running. "Can you tell me," he cried, suddenly checking his speed, "where I can find a doctor?" "What's the matter?" Halverson asked, non-committal. "Go and see for yourself," said the man, resuming his running. They hastened on. Arrived at the house, they saw several persons entering in haste and excitement. In some of the dwelling nearby and across the way, the chamber windows was thrown up, showing a protrusion of heads. All heads were asking questions, none heeding the questions of the others. A few of the windows with closed blinds were illuminated. The inmates of those rooms were dressing to come down. Exactly opposite the door of the house that they sought, a street lamp threw a yellow, insufficient light upon the scene, seeming to say that it could disclose a good deal more if it wished. Harper paused at the door and laid a hand upon his companion's arm. "It is all up with us, Doctor," he said in extreme agitation, which contrasted strangely with his free and easy words. "The game has gone against us all. Let's not go in there. I'm for lying low." "I'm a physician," said Dr. Halverson calmly. "There may be need of one." They mounted the doorsteps and were about to enter. The door was open. The street lamp opposite lighted the passage into which it opened. It was full of men. Some had ascended the stairs at the farther end and denied admittance above, waited for better fortune. All were talking, none listening. Suddenly, on the upper landing, there was a great commotion. A man had sprung out of a door and was breaking away from those endeavoring to detain him. Down through the mass of affrighted idlers he came, pushing them aside, flattening them against the wall on one side, or compelling them to cling to the rail on the other, clutching them by the throat, striking them savagely, thrusting them back down the stairs, and walking over the fallen. His clothing was in disorder. He was without a hat. His eyes, wild and restless, had in them something more terrifying than his apparently superhuman strength. His face, smooth-shaven, was bloodless. His hair froze white. As the crowd at the foot of the stairs, having more freedom, fell away to let him pass, Harper sprang forward. "Jared! Jared!" he cried. Dr. Halverson seized Harper by the collar and dragged him back. The man looked into their faces without seeming to see them and sprang through the door, down the steps, into the street and away. A stout policeman, who had inferior success in conquering his way down the stairway, followed a moment later and started in pursuit, all the heads in the window, those of women and children now, screaming in guidance. The stairways being now partly cleared, most of the crowd having rushed down to the street, to observe the flight and pursuit. Dr. Halverson mounted to the landing, followed by Harper. At the door in the upper passage, an officer denied them admittance. "We are physicians," said the doctor, and they passed in. The room was full of men, dimly seen, crowded about the table. The newcomers edged their way forward and looked over the shoulders of those in the front rank around the table. Upon the table, the lower limbs, covered with a sheet, lay the body of a man, brilliantly illuminated by the beam of a bull's-eye lantern held by a policeman standing at the feet. The others, excepting those near the head, the officer himself, all were in darkness. The face of the body showed yellow, repulsive horror. The eyes were partly open and upturned, and the jaw fell. Traces of froth defiled the lips, the chin, the cheeks. A tall man, evidently a doctor, bent over the body with his hand thrust under the shirt front. He withdrew it and placed 2 fingers in the open mouth. "This man has been dead about 6 hours," he said. "It is a case for the coroner." He drew a card from his pocket, handed it to the officer, and made his way towards the door. "Clear the room out, all," said the officer sharply, and the body disappeared as if it had been snatched away. As shifting the lantern, he flashed his beam of light here and there against the faces of the crowd. The effect was amazing. The men, blinded, confused, almost terrified, made a tumultuous rush for the door, pushing, crowding, and tumbling over one another as they fled, like the host of the night before the sheaf of Apollo. Upon the struggling, trampling mass, the officer poured his light without pity and without cessation. Caught in the current, Halverson and Harper were swept out of the room and cascaded down the stairs into the street. "Good God, Doctor, did I not tell you that Jared would kill him?" said Harper as soon as they were cleared of the crowd. "I believe you did," replied the other, without apparent emotion. They walked on in silence, block after block. Against the greying east, the dwellings of the hill tribes showed in the silhouette. The familiar milk wagon was against a stir in the streets. The baker's man would soon come upon the scene. The newspaper carrier was abroad in the land. "It strikes me, youngster," said Halverson, "that you and I have been having too much morning air lately. It is unwholesome. We need a change. What do you say to a tour in Europe?" "When?" "I'm not particular. I should suppose that 4 o'clock this afternoon would be early enough." "I'll meet you at the boat," said Harper. 7 years afterwards, these 2 men sat upon a bench in Madison Square, New York, in familiar conversation. Another man who had been observing them for some time, himself unobserved, approached, and courteously lifting his hat from locks as white as frost, he said at the man, open-mouthed. He trembled visibly. "Ah," said the stranger, "I see that you are indisposed, doctor. If you cannot treat yourself, Dr. Harper can do something for you, I am sure." "Who the devil are you?" said Harper bluntly. The stranger came nearer and bending towards them said in a whisper, "I call myself Jared. Sometimes, but I don't mind telling you, for old friendship, that I am Dr. William Manchester." The revelation brought Harper to his feet. "Mancher!" he cried, and Halverson added, "It is true, by God." "Yes," said the stranger, smiling vaguely. "It is true enough, no doubt." He hesitated and seemed to be trying to recall something, then began humming a popular air. He had apparently forgotten their presence. "Look here, Mancher," said the elder of the two. "Tell us just what occurred that night to Jared, you know." "Oh yes, about Jared," said the other. "It's odd I should have neglected to tell you. I tell it so often. You see, I knew by overhearing him talking to himself that he was pretty badly frightened." Nothing could exceed the ferocity with which these last words were delivered. Both men stepped back in alarm. "We? Why? Halverson stammered, losing his self-possession utterly. "We had nothing to do with it." "Didn't I say you were Doctors Halsborn and Sharper?" inquired the man, laughing. "My name is Halverson, yes, And this gentleman, Mr. Harper, replied the former, reassured by the laugh. But we are not physicians now. We are, well, hang it, old man, we are gamblers. And that was the truth. A very good profession. Very good indeed. And by the way, I hope Sharper here paid over Gerald's money like an honest owner. A very good and honourable profession, he replied, thoughtfully, moving carelessly away. But I stick to the old one. I am the High Supreme Medical Officer of the Blooming Steel Iceland. It is by my duty to cure the Superintendent